to help create like new jobs that are going to help people in, this post-COVID recovery or anything. It's just going to be wasted. But we're buttoned up on an hour here, so let's go ahead and talk about this Portland story that you had shown me. That a little bit of good news to wrap up the week here. Well, it looks like more elected officials are saying no to facial recognition in public places.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one. So the like you said, the Portland City Council on Wednesday voted to almost completely ban all facial recognition technology. It is kind of a mixed thing though, because they're not only banning it for government agencies, but they're doing this unprecedented thing where they're also banning like private agencies, private actors from using this technology in public places as well. So that applied to like most businesses and other private, actors. Um, and the ban on the government though applies immediately, and that includes for the cops. So the cops are now completely barred from using this technology altogether. Um, but with the government, there's an odd exception they carved out for Portland public schools for some reason. Like they are allowing the schools to use facial recognition tech for some reason. It seems like this could open up some kind of loophole where you might have a case where the schools can then collect the data and the biometrics and then maybe pass their findings to the cops. I'm not totally sure I didn't read the entire legislation, so maybe there is something that closes that loophole. But that seems kind of weird that they're allowing the schools to still use it. Um, but regardless, that's in effect right now. That came into effect immediately. The private ban though for private companies, that is going to come into effect first thing next year. And so they're giving a little bit more time for people to prepare for that. Um, but a lot of companies in Oregon and around, or excuse me, in Portland and around Oregon are kind of like up in arms about this. They're not too happy. They're saying that this law is written in a very vague and broad way. And I think they're because it allows people to sue companies who do end up using facial recognition tech on people. And so I think the companies are worried that this is going to lead to a lot of like litigious, like frivolous lawsuits, things like that. And so they were, very much opposed to it. But I think another interesting part of the private element of this is that how Amazon got involved. Amazon spent like $24,000 on lobbying efforts to kill the legislation in Portland, despite the fact that Amazon itself keeps calling for stricter government controls of this very technology. Like earlier this year, they said they were going to stop like allowing police departments to use their own facial recognition software. And when they announced that, they straight up called for, quote, stronger regulation from the government of this kind of technology. Yet when the Portland government tries to do it, they try to act on their own advice. They step in and try to stop it. And now, like, $24,000 is not very much money for, Amazon. They're one of the biggest companies on the planet. But we are just talking about lobbying in one city here, just in Portland. So I think 24 grand is a decent amount of money. And not to mention, that's just what we see in the public records too. Like who knows what other kind of money they threw around behind the scenes that they weren't obligated to report or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, so ultimately, I think this is sort of a mixed thing. Like I'm 100% down with the government ban of this technology, but I think it is sort of mixed with the private companies. Some of those businesses might have sort of a point here in arguing against this ban. But insofar as this prevents the state and the police from getting this biometric data and using this technology, I'm fully behind that.
Right. Well, this has been the only thing about the mask that I kind of have a warm feeling towards the mask about is that
Yeah,
apparently they kill facial recognition. Like it doesn't work with masks.
yeah,
They say they're trying to like determine by eyes, but like even now, like it's not that expensive to get colored contacts or something like that, anyways. Or I wear contacts, so my eyes glare a lot more. I'm sure that would throw it off, and all this kind of stuff is,
sunglasses.
yeah, all this stuff is making facial recognition kind of irrelevant, and so that's the good news. Something that was brought up, I think his name's Sherrod Butler. He's the guy that either is or was running against Nancy Pelosi for the Democrat primary. Something that he had brought up that he's very concerned about. He says, the body cameras are good in a way, but in another way, you're also attaching a camera that could do facial recognition to every single cop. Like, this is
Right,
a problem
surveillance.
we have to regulate against cops using facial recognition on their body cameras. So that I guess is something that Portland had already passed before this, but this would also limit police officers from using other kinds of facial recognition, which this kind of stuff is legitimately good news and things that other cities want to be doing. I know that the city council in Portland is completely crazy socialist and communist, but that doesn't mean they're going to get everything wrong every time. And I think they've certainly did a mostly good thing on this one. As you said, there's the private business thing, and maybe there are some private businesses that do have a legitimate reason to use facial recognition. I guess
Yeah.
my kind of thought is actually, well, won't the police just contract with the private company, and in which case, this actually may solve that problem. I'm not sure what kind of private company wants to use facial recognition or how useful it could be, but at the, I guess I would suspect that the cops would try to go third party to try to avoid, the regulation in this bill. And in that case, I think it could be a good thing that they even actually included private here. And maybe I'll read a story in a week about like some poor bank that's like losing their facial recognition. They're in a terrible neighborhood and they're going to get robbed 400 times now. Um,
Right.
so something like that could happen that I'm not aware of. I'm just saying I know how the government gets around these kind of things, and so maybe it actually works out better that this technology just isn't allowed. The last thing I'll note is you're talking about Amazon, who just hired a former NSA director to their board. I think it was
Yeah, they did.
Kenneth or Keith Alexander, right?
Yes, yes, Keith Alexander.
Yeah. So you keep an eye on what Amazon's doing.
Yeah, they're bastards, man.
It's convenient. I get my stuff on Amazon from time to time too.
Right.
But you keep an eye on them and know that anything that you're, putting through Amazon, is now in the hands of somebody who used to work for the NSA. And so I'm guessing he's only going to deepen and, increase the cooperation between, the NSA and the government, especially when, they find out that that thing pays big bucks. They just lost the Jedi contract again.
Yeah.
That's the Pentagon's cloud computing. Initially, a $10 billion contract. They awarded to Microsoft again, but I know Amazon really wanted that contract and I believe sued several times. They've now have several lawsuits out there to try to prevent Microsoft from getting this. Although I think Microsoft will end up getting in then. And it's another crazy thing that this project's been delayed 3 years, I think, now because these companies keep suing each other over it. It's like,
Right.
they talk about we need to spend this $10 billion on critical software that we need right now. And then they're willing to wait for 3 years while different companies bid and sue each other.